All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to our October deep dive discussion in the Life is Planned Mastermind. I'm excited to jump into these topics of schedule, boundaries, and burnout. These are all very real things. And so I'm sure we'll have some great conversations. So I'm going to start just by popping over to my slides. That did not work. What did it do? Okay. This is bizarre. Okay, one moment. We just had it and it just worked great. And then it decided to disappear. Oh, it did. It literally disappeared. Well, that's fantastic. Give me one moment while I find my... I've never had that happen where a window or something just disappears in the middle of a training. So that's fun. All right, let's try this again, shall we? All righty, we got this open. Thank you guys for your patience. For those of you watching the replay, my sincerest apologies for that technical difficulty. But we're recording now, so I should be able to go ahead and share. I'm gonna share this. Here we go. All right, now I'm gonna go to presenter and make this full screen. So can you guys see your faces? Yeah, you can see the video. That's okay. That's fine, right? That you guys see that in the corner of my screen. That's like the least important place for us to be. All right. So today we're going to talk about schedules, boundaries, and burnout. And there's so much that we could talk about. So really what I tried to do is distill some of this into like some of the smaller things that we can do that have like the biggest impact is what I've tried to break down here. So oh, there we go. Okay, schedule. Apparently it makes a noise every time I change slides. So technology is not on my side today. But anyway, so let's start with schedule. And we'll give this like a minute to catch up. Is it going to catch up? Nope. We might just do this the small way. Oh, there it is. I'm going to exit because I don't want to mess around with this. So we're just going to look at it like this. Okay, guys, we're going to see the whole slides. I don't want weird noises. All right, so 3 big mental shifts when it comes to schedule. And I'm kind of jumping around a little bit between this. And then I've also got a list of exercises and resources and other kind of things for us to discuss later in the call. But the big thing here is to view our time when it comes to our schedule in 168 hours. Most of us think about our schedule and our time in terms of 24-hour days. And one of the biggest, best shifts we could possibly make is looking at our time in a week instead of all the days. And so what that allows us to do is it allows us to just get a bigger perspective, because so much of the time we're trying to put all this pressure on ourselves to like, I need to walk every day and I need to read every day. But it's like, as long as you're doing those things a few times in a week, you're still making momentum and still making progress. And so that's a big mental shift to make when it comes to your schedule. The other aspect is the time and energy formula. So some of you might be familiar with this. I'm going to go over it in just a minute because I have a diagram for you, which you can see over here. And then the last thing is it's not a priority. So these are 3 things that, although they're really simple, if we can like embrace these, it makes a huge difference in our schedule, how we think about our time, how we actually block our time, how we give away our time, like all of that. So the time and energy formula, let's jump to this. This is what most of us do. Included, I slip into this all the time. So guys, like it's not like once you hear this concept and like try it once, suddenly like you've just got it. It definitely, at least for me anyway, takes like so much repetition. It takes messing up. It takes forgetting about this and being like feeling overwhelmed and then being like, oh my gosh, I keep forgetting to put Like this is all I'm doing is my executing time. Whereas a proactive thinking remembers that they need time to plan those things, then they need to execute, and then they need to recover. And so that's just a really important piece of this, is remembering, okay, yes, I think it's going to take me 1 hour to do those errands, but you know what? I have to put together my list of errands if it's not already together, and I've got to do some prep, and I have to drive to the first store, think about the route I'm going to take so that I don't like end up crisscrossing myself all over town. And then, oh, when I get home, I actually like have to put things away. Like I think this happens a lot, especially with grocery shopping. I don't know if you guys experience this, but it's like, I'll do my meal plan. So I'm great with the planning and then I do the execution, but I almost always forget still after all this time that, oh, when I get home, I have to unpack everything and then I have to wash all my fruits and vegetables and put them in the fridge. And then usually I still have to make supper that night. So there's some sort of prep I have to do. And so just trying to really build in this plan, execute, recover is really, really key. So it's simple, but super powerful. So then let's just pop back up to here. It's not a priority. This is a phrase I talk about in my Save Your Time course. And it really is just one of those phrases that a lot of us say very regularly, which is, I don't have enough time. Okay. Yes. Anyone ever said that? I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time to do that. I don't have enough time, whatever. The reframe or the mental shift, which is why these three things are all mental shifts, is because they're not as tactical as they are very much like these changes that we make in how we think about time. But instead of saying, I don't have enough time, saying it's not a priority. And it is amazing how that simple shift can make a huge difference when it comes to how you look at and plan your time. Because when we're saying, I don't have enough time, we're like, it's not necessarily an excuse, I guess, but it can be. Sometimes it can be a bit of an excuse where it's like, yeah, I don't have enough time. And so we just like put things off, or we tell our friends, oh, I can't do that. I don't have enough time. Like I'm too busy, da da da. Whereas saying it's not a priority is, I love, Crystal, what you said in the chat. It's an empowering thing, because what that does is it puts the control back on us and says, you know what, I'm deciding that this task today, right now, this week, this year is not a priority. And so those are my 3 big mental shifts for you when it comes to schedule. And then let's pop down here because I've got 3 quick tips too. The first one is margin. This one I love. If you guys have been around the Modern Planner community for a while, you know that I absolutely love talking about margin. And one of the best, most practical, simple things you can do is the 2X rule. I actually did a guest training yesterday in somebody's Facebook group, and we were talking about this 2X rule. And she said, out of all the things she learned in my program, because she was in the quarterly for, I think, 6 months, she said the 2X rule is the one thing that I use all the time. Like I grabbed that out of the schedule month, and like that's one of the biggest shifts that she's been able to make, is that she uses the 2X rule with everything, and she's noticed a massive difference. And so and it's just about creating that margin and that space. Guys, real story time, okay? Because I'm supposedly, the expert, whatever, right? Like I've learned a lot of things and I teach a lot of this stuff, but that doesn't mean that like I don't struggle with it too. And this week there was this much margin in my business week, like this much. I'm not kidding. I'm launching a course tonight with Brogan. Very exciting, but like had some stuff that just kept getting pushed off. Last week, I only had 2 days in the office. Then I was doing 6 days of solo parenting. And like, I just did not give myself enough margin. And so today I had to decline a coffee chat I was supposed to do earlier this afternoon, because I was like, I don't have time. I can't do this. And so even though I talk about margin, it is just a daily, weekly, like it's an ongoing thing to remind ourselves. And I think we go through seasons where we like forget it. And then it's like, okay, reality check, margin. I need more margin in my life. I need to use the 2X rule. I need to schedule like a whole afternoon for my business a week with nothing in it, specifically to catch up on all the things that happen throughout the week, as opposed to blocking and booking everything so much that then I'm always feeling overwhelmed or behind. So margin is a big one. Time blocking. You guys know I love myself a good time block. I'm not the kind of person that schedules every 30 minutes and like do. That's not really my thing. I really struggle with following through on that. My concept of time blocking that I really encourage people to dive into and look at is blocking in 60, 90 minutes, 120-minute blocks where you're giving yourself time to, I'm going to work on this big project, or I'm going to work on emails. Boom. There's a big time block. Or you know what? I'm going to set up this whole day. Fridays is going to be my meeting day. And we time block. So as opposed to making sure that every little block of time is scheduled, because well, that doesn't give us margin. So if we time block too much, then we're not giving ourselves, right? So it's figuring out, okay, how do I do this? And you can give yourself margin in those time blocks by saying, okay, I think it's going to take me 1 hour to put together that presentation. So put 2 hours of that time block in your calendar. And if you finish in 75 minutes or 90 minutes, awesome. Now you've got an extra 30 to do something else with. Whereas most of us keep our blocks of time as small as they can. So I would just encourage you to try to create some bigger time blocks for some of the bigger projects that you are saying are most important to you right now. And then the third quick tip I have for schedules is power hour. So really looking at your schedule to see if you're able to block 30 minutes in the morning, 1 hour after lunch, finding a time of day where you can have a power hour where you say, this is always devoted to like my most important task, or maybe it's devoted to your most important task of the week. So you're like, okay, this week, like for instance, me, this week, it's all about the course. So what would have been amazing if my 9 to 10 block from Monday to Friday could have been marketing for the course. So writing emails, social media, and I had just blocked that out. I didn't do that. I have a big block tomorrow morning instead. But that's how we can use power hours. And sometimes just having that block where we're able to make progress on something right away or later in our day is really great. So that is, I love what Wendy said. Wendy said scheduling in that much detail just sets me up to fail. It sets most of us up to fail. Let's be honest. I know that it's like a productivity hack, but like I'm totally not all about it. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. And so I'm also going to unpin my video so that we can go back to like the gallery view. So what I want to know from you guys is when it comes to schedule, any of the stuff that we've already talked about, or if you just have a schedule question, let's dive into that right now since we're talking about it, and then we'll spend some time on boundaries. So any thoughts, any questions, any stories?
I'll jump in then really quick. When you share that you haven't perfected it yet, it just gives such much freedom and space to be like, okay, I'm going to be in this, program for a decade before I actually get it perfected, if that. So thank you for that. But also, it just made me think again about power hour and it being your power hour, just because my power hour might be at 10 p.m. at night, right? I don't need to feel ashamed for that. Like,
no.
It's just realizing and giving yourself the space to find out what that is.
Well, and so many people, like the power hour, I'm trying to remember who used that phrase the first time. I don't know. It's kind of like a common like phrase to use, like a power hour. But almost every single person that talks about it in the first hour of your day, and it needing to be 60 minutes right at the beginning. So maybe it's at like 5:30 before you go to work, or it's at like 8 o'clock when you first get into work. And like, that's how almost everyone talks about it. And to me, and you guys know, this is my modern planner, like heart, is it's like, there are lots of great tips and tricks out there, but so many people share them in a way that puts them in these small boxes that then if it doesn't work for us, or if it doesn't fit, then we're like, oh, well, I might as well just get rid of that because I can't do a power hour, right? So it's like we write things off because those tips or tricks don't work for us, when in reality, you can have your power hour whatever time of day you want, and it can be as long as you want, and you can do whatever you want in it, right? It's just the concept of setting aside focused time to work on your most important task. That's what it's about. And I wish more people would talk about, especially when it comes to like things about time management and schedule, I wish more people would talk about it that way. Like, It's about creating a schedule that serves you. Here's a bunch of ideas. Try some on for fit, but like there's no rules with how you use these things. So anyway, that's just a bit of a pet peeve of mine. If you couldn't tell, I don't follow very many productivity and time management coaches because I'm always like, I'm like, stop telling people that. Anyway, but yeah. I love how much Wendy has been getting a kick out of this. You're just like laughing away. You're like, that is so funny. Do you have any thoughts or a story?
I guess what I would say is that I find, well, my schedule is different from day to day.
Yes.
And there's not like one time that would always work, but I find I'm not an early bird. I'm not a night owl. I like to sleep.
I'm neither of those either, and it's challenging.
And so I think what I've found, I mean, my schedule fluctuates and I just find what works best for me. Do I buckle down and do some work at 6:30 at night in the office when most of the other admin staff are gone? Yes, it's quiet then. 7:30 in the morning is not so quiet and a lot more difficult to have quiet time. So I think some of it is based on the environment too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because I mean, so I'm in our admin offices and our break rooms just down the hall and that kind of stuff. So if staff are having HR questions, you know, they might come before their break, after their break, that kind of stuff, when there's more traffic and all that kind of stuff. So evening sometimes just works best.
Yeah, totally.
And it also feels like it's, well, it's not necessarily maybe a power hour. It's almost like setting myself up for success the next day.
Absolutely. But that could be what your power hour is focused on. Right. It could be like, you know what, every day, regardless of what time it is, I'm going to set aside a certain amount of time to make sure that I'm setting myself up for tomorrow for success. Right? Like that's the beauty of being able to say, okay, yeah, this is the perspective I'm going to take and this is how I'm going to do. And figuring out our environments and like what works, like working from home. Oh my gosh, you guys, it took me so long to figure it out. What worked for me. Well, and then I had a baby and then it totally changed again. And then she started doing some childcare and I was like, oh my gosh, like a whole day to work. Like, I don't even know what to do in a whole day. Like I've just been like grabbing nap times, like here and there for like so long that I didn't even know like how to do that anymore and like how to set up a daily schedule. And then I had the whole summer off with her. And then in September, she was at full time. And I was like, I don't know what to do with myself. Like I hadn't had that space to work for like over 2 years. Right. And so that's the thing about schedule that so many of us forget is like, we constantly have to be changing and evaluating and doing things as seasons like shift and as we, you know, take on different positions or as we have to train new staff. Like a training season is going to have different requirements on your schedule than a season where like everybody has been there. You've been going for 6 months. You haven't made any new hires. Like that's a different kind of daily rhythm than when you're constantly hiring new people. Right. And so I think just acknowledging that whether we are at a job or we're running our own business or what it looks like, our season's constantly shifting and so does our schedule. Like it has to reflect that too. So yeah. So a couple exercises that I have, and if you guys want these, let me know. I'll maybe, I don't know the best way to do this. I think what I might do, you guys can give me some feedback in the WhatsApp group, but I'll just maybe list out what some of the exercises are. And then if you guys want specific ones, then maybe let me know and I could link them in the course as opposed to me going and finding them all. But then if no one wants some of them. So I think if you want something, just let me know in the WhatsApp group. Hey, Catherine, looked at these, or if people are watching the replay. So the one is an ideal week. And that basically is just when you take a full week schedule and you say, okay, this is a blank week. If I could have an ideal week, what would this look like? Now, obviously that's different when every day is not the same. But even thinking about that in terms of like what you always know is your morning and what you always know is your night. And I think you work weekends too sometimes, don't you, Wendy? Yeah. And Sundays, or do you always have Sundays off?
I work whenever I want to and whenever is convenient. So
Okay.
if I work a weekend, well, not this week, but generally, if I work a weekend, I'll take a day during the week off.
Right.
So I'm not typically working 6 or 7 days. Not typically
Yeah.
working 6 or 7 days a week, but yes,
Yeah,
flexible.
totally. So for instance, because I've done this ideal week schedule with people whose like husbands work like crazy shift work, and like they had like 7 different shifts and their schedule was on like this massive rotation. And so she's like, nothing's ever the same. I don't think it was 7 shifts, but it was basically like, it was a huge rotation where it wasn't just like 2 weeks of this and then 2 weeks of that, 2 weeks of this. Like it wasn't like that. So she didn't have 2 options. It was like 4 or 5 like different shifts, and they didn't go by week. It would be like a week and a half of this and then 2 weeks of this and then a week and a half of like, and it was really like bizarre. And so what I encouraged her to do is set up an ideal day as opposed to a week, create an ideal day for each of the shifts. So so basically getting rid of the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday at the top and saying, okay, for this shift, this is what our day is going to look like. Like sometimes it was like eating breakfast together and like doing something as a family in the morning, because then he would be gone. So then they couldn't do anything at night. So then she would work during the afternoon. And like, so it was figuring out like, when is she going to run her business? Because she was just trying to do like the 9 to 5 hours for her business, but her husband's shift work didn't work like that. And so that's just a really great example of where like you could take the ideal week, Wendy, and instead of making it days, just say, this is what I want my ideal day to look like when I'm off. This is what I want it to look like when I'm doing an early, like more of a morning shift. This is what I want it to look like when I'm doing a later shift into the night, and like almost doing it like that. So then regardless of the day that it is, you can go, okay, it's this. Oh, well, now I know what my schedule is going to look like and what I'm going to do in the mornings or the evenings, right? And so looking at it that way and taking that flexibility.
Well, it's funny because as you were saying that, I'm like, that sounds awful. And then I was thinking, I'm like, wait, I think that's actually my schedule.
Yeah, like based upon what you've told me, like that is what your schedule is. Like it's different all the time.
But I like it. The example made it sound really bad. Maybe that's what people think of my schedule.
I couldn't handle it. Like that would just, if for me, I could probably handle it if it was like my spouse doing that and like I'd figure a way to work around it. But like I personally, like I really like routine. And so having something that would be so all over the place like that, I couldn't handle it. Crystal's like, you would find that stressful too? Yeah. I love that you were like, that's awful when listening to the example. And then you're like, wait, that's me and I like it. Oh, it's so funny. And Crystal, your comment, I'm Canadian. You'd think seasons would be an easier concept to grasp. But and we forget about that. Like we think that, oh, this thing I tried or my morning routine, I created that a year ago. Like it should still work. Well, no, well, not if something major has changed in your life. Like that's why these things are supposed to change. Actually, the call I did yesterday, one of the things I talked about was I'm like, planning is an active verb. It means that you're actively planning. You can create a plan, but I don't want to teach people how to create a plan. I want to teach people how to make planning part of their like life, because that's like an ongoing thing. And it's the same with schedule. It's like, our schedule, our lives are like active, like we're actively living them, which means they actively change. So we need to actively be adjusting them as we go. So anyway, yay. Okay. That was fun. Crystal's like, you're making a funny face. Tell me what's coming up for you in that.
I get attached, like you said, to like this worked. And so I want it to work. Why isn't it working? And so, yeah, adjusting is not my favorite part, but I think that's the link that's missing and causing a lot of friction and stress in my life, that if I would just learn that step and give room for that, then it would be a lot less stressful. Sure.
Yeah. Do you do like a weekly check-in with yourself at all, where you like go through last week, kind of plan your week ahead, look at it?
I had that set up to be at a certain time of the week, and then things changed. And so now I'm like, well, now where do I put it?
Somewhere different.
Exactly.
That works for you. Yeah, put it somewhere different. that is totally a thing to change. What I would encourage you, I think one of the things that you should add to your weekly check-in when you reschedule a time, by the way, I'm writing that down. I'm going to check in with you on WhatsApp. Crystal, new weekly check-in time. And just try it in different places for a few weeks. Be like, you know what? Okay, this weekend I'm going to try it on a Sunday morning or a Sunday night. And then next weekend I'm going to try it on a Saturday morning. And then the next weekend, you know what? I'm going to try it on a Friday night before I leave the office. You know, like just try it in a few different places for a month and see what feels the most relaxed and like energizing to you. And then
it's so opposite to how my brain works. Like my brain is like, I'm going to figure it out. What's the best scenario? I'm going to know it in my head and then I'll do it.
Yeah. But did you read my experimenting email from a few weeks ago?
Maybe.
Basically it went out to like my whole Modern Planner community. But I was really just talking about this whole aspect of like experimenting and how, because of how I'm naturally wired with like being a rule follower and like wanting to do things like a certain way, I really shied away from experimenting for a long time until I realized like, this is the only way I figure out what works. Like I can make an educated guess, but I still have to like try a couple things to see what's going to be the best for me. And honestly, see experimenting as like, I see it now as fun. Like, let's just try this and see what happens. And I think having that, like, because it's a weekly review. No one's life is on the line. You know what I mean? Like, it's a fairly like low-key thing. So just be like, you know what? I'm just going to see what happens. I'm going to try it on this day, this time. I'm going to try it on this day, this time. Let's see what happens and what I like best. So that was a little side note. But what I really wanted to say was I think one of the questions that you should have in your weekly review based upon how you are and how much you struggle with adjusting is you should ask yourself the question, what felt really great this week? So that you are actually ready, and you need to like write this down because you need to be able to like track and go back and read past entries and be like, what is working? Like what felt really great this week? You know what? Getting out and walking before work or after work or before the sun sets or walking with my hubby or walking with the girls. You know what I mean? Like maybe there's certain kinds of walking that are great and certain kinds you're like, that didn't feel as great as I thought it would. Right. So, what felt great this week? And then the other question I think you should ask is what didn't feel in alignment? So like what's just kind of like, you know, that things that like just have a little bit of tension in our lives, like they just create this like, there's just this like off feeling, like something's not quite right. And then just then there's two follow-ups to that. The first follow-up would be, what do I think might be causing that? Is that one question. And then the second question is, how could I make a slight adjustment or a slight tweak to improve that experience? So that you could do that in relation to your weekly review even. What part of sitting down and doing this feels really great? You know what? I love sitting in my big cozy chair with a cup of coffee. Okay, what didn't feel great or what felt a little bit out of alignment? It was too busy or there were people all around the house. So like I need to do this after they go to bed or like before they get up or you know what I mean? And like what kind of tweak could you make? But that goes for like anything with our schedule. What is feeling great and what is feeling out of alignment and how could I make a tweak? Not just what's feeling out of alignment. Okay, this is feeling out of alignment. Good to know. Because then what happens is we're like, oh, this is feeling out of alignment. I should get rid of it. But that's not what adjusting is all about. Adjusting isn't about saying, oh, this isn't working. Okay, bye. But that's what most of us do. Adjusting is about saying what isn't working. Okay, why isn't it working? Can I figure out what part of this isn't working for me? And then the second piece of that is, okay, how can I make a small adjustment? Most of us want to like overhaul, be like, hey, my morning routine's not working. Get rid of it and then be like, okay, here's my new 15 steps. Like, don't do that. You're just setting yourself up to fail. Right? So it's like, okay, what is working for me right now? I'll just use an example of myself because I can't use your examples, but if you'd like to share them, feel free. my morning routine. What works really well is being totally ready for my day before Em wakes up. The slight adjustment I need to make, I'm not always having time to stretch, which means I'm not consistently getting up early enough with my alarm. I hit snooze too many times. And so sometimes I'm always ready, but whether or not I've had time to journal and stretch, those two things are right now negotiable based upon how much time I have to get ready. So I always get ready whether or not I do those other two things. And so for me, like those two things, I really want to get them in there. But that means I have to go to bed earlier and get more sleep. Because the reason why I can't get up in the morning, I know, is because I'm tired because I didn't get enough sleep. Right? So that's just a morning routine thought on adjustment. Were those questions helpful? I saw Wendy writing them down too, so hopefully that was good. If I did not write them down as I was saying them, I have them in my head and I'm pretty sure I can remember what they are because I think that would be a great thing to post in the group. What felt great, and then it was out of alignment, and then, well, right there. I'm just going to copy and paste that into my document, and then I'll share that in the WhatsApp group because I feel like that's going to be really helpful for everybody. Thanks, Crystal. Unless you're watching the replay and you already wrote it down, in which case, awesome, you have it in your notes too. Okay, let's pop over to some boundary stuff that I want to touch on because this is all connected, which is why I put these ones together because they all overlap. So let me share my slides again, and we'll just go through these few things on boundaries. Boundaries. I want to, before we do this, I want to talk about oh, Wendy, good call. Were there other resources beside the Ideal Week? Ideal Week was one of them. I'm hiding it with my slides, so just a minute. The other one is an energy audit. So that I have as a worksheet. Basically, you just make a list of questions. What energizes me and what drains me? And you just go through and you have a piece of paper, and as you think of things, you add it. And just being aware, because what we don't realize, and this is why the time and energy formula is important, which let me just go back to that one for a minute, this slide, is what we don't realize with our schedule is that our energy plays a way bigger factor than most of us think it does. And so let's choose, what should we choose as an example? Let's choose meal planning as an example. Someone might find actually doing the planning part to take so long, but they're super fast in the grocery store. Once they've got their list, they know what they're doing, they shop their sales, that part is easy, and they're so fast at putting everything away. They're like ninjas, and it's done. Other people might find the grocery shopping to be harder. Maybe they don't enjoy it as much, and so the execution is hard. But the planning to create their meal plan, it's super fast because they've got a great system for that. Or it doesn't take as much energy, but being out in public and like being at the grocery store and they get distracted and whatever, right? So some of these things might be based on energy. And so it's really important. So the energy audit, figuring out like what drains you and what fills you and energizes you, can help you see what might take you longer because it's actually energy draining. So anyway, that's one of the things. So Ideal Week, energy audit, and then the other one is the activity audit. And I have a link to that. That's a video resource that I have. And if you've never done an activity audit, I'd really encourage you to do that. So I'll link that one for sure. Let me just make a note. Because that's a link to a video. So that's an easy one for me to link to. And the energy audit is really just, you can use any piece of paper to do that. So, okay. Was that helpful? There we go. Thank you, Wendy. Sometimes I get distracted. Time tracking. I would recommend that you time track for 2 weeks before you make any major assessments or adjustments to your schedule. That's always kind of my minimum. A lot of people will just say, oh, just do 1 week, but every week is not the same. So I think at least doing 2, and you don't have to do 2 back to back. You could do 2 if you know that you've got 2 weeks that are totally different, then do those 2 weeks. But yeah, that's my recommendation, is always to do 2 weeks. I keep looking down here because that's where your faces are right now, but I'm like, I should be looking at the camera because that's where you actually are and looking at me. So my apologies. All right. Boundaries. Oh, before I did that, I wanted to read this section. Have any of you read Rising Strong by Brene Brown? No. Okay. Guys, if boundaries is something you struggle with, it's on the list. Okay, Wendy, bump it up. It's such a good read. It took me a long time to read this book, not because I didn't like it or because it was dry, but because I felt like I was trying to underline like every other sentence. And I was just like, oh, wow, that's me. Oh, wow, I've walked through that. Oh, wow, that's an amazing thought. Like, it just is such a powerful book. So in chapter 6, she's talking about boundaries. And she's got a few different things in here. But she basically, the most compassionate people that Brene Brown interviewed also had the most well-defined and well-respected boundaries. So that's the correlation she found. The most compassionate people had the most well-defined and well-respected boundaries. Compassionate people ask for what they need. They say no when they need to, and when they say yes, they mean it. And what happens is their boundaries keep them out of resentment. And that for me is like always just a big reminder, because usually if I'm starting to feel like bitterness or resentment or something show up in my life, it means there's an area in my life either where a boundary has been crossed, but I haven't communicated it, or where I don't have a boundary to begin with. So anyway, always good. But then she says here, what I realized was that a generous assumption without boundaries is another recipe for resentment, misunderstanding, and judgment. We could all stand to be more generous, but we also need to maintain our integrity and our boundaries. The solution: living big, boundaries, integrity, and generosity. What boundaries do I need to put in place so I can work from a place of integrity and extend the most generous interpretations of the intentions, words, and actions of others? So that right there, the solution, I'm just going to copy this paragraph and throw that in the chat for you guys, because then you don't have to like write that down. But on page 125, this is what she says. She realized that boundaries are simply lists of what's okay and what's not okay. And I'm like, that makes it so easy. Like, what's okay and what's not okay. And so she uses an example of an artist. Her name is Kelly Ray, and she's an artist, a teacher, and an entrepreneur. Over the past 5 to 6 years, her artwork has exploded. A lot of people recognize it. But basically what happened is her career began taking off, and she began licensing her work globally. There was massive like copyright infringement, and all like these things started happening. And so she responded to it by writing a blog post called "What Is and Is Not Okay." The post was kind, generous, explicit, straightforward, and unflinching. And so an edited version. I just want to read this for you because I think sometimes, actually, I think what I need to do in my life right now is write out what's okay and what's not okay list for relationships. And then I need to communicate it to some people. So it's not okay to use one of my images as your profile photo on Facebook or any other website without an artist credit. This violates copyright law. To make copies of the art instructions for my book, articles, or classes and publish them to your blogs and websites. So it's like, it's not okay. It's also not okay to reword my instructions and use them for a class you are teaching for profit or to submit them to magazines for publication. It's not okay to publish videos or photos on your blogs and websites showing my book, class, step-by-step instructions, or painting process. Like, very clear. Like, this is what's not okay. And then it's okay to send me an email asking if you can use one of my images for any reason. Like, you can use it, just ask me for it. Anyway, so it's like super, super clear. But what I loved about this example is boundaries are simply our list of what's okay and what's not okay. And so what I've got for you today in these slides, I should have taken it off screen share, so I'm apologizing about that. is I just want to share a few key areas of boundaries that I think we need to keep in mind. So social is a big one. That's family, friends, relationships, the frequency and expectations with which we hang out with people. That all like comes up so much. Let me give you one question. This is another journaling question, like the schedule one that I gave you. And it's this: areas where you feel overstretched, taken advantage of, or where you're wasting time. So think of areas where you're feeling that way: overstretched, taken advantage of, or wasting your time. And then the questions to ask, the follow-ups are, why do I feel this way? And how did this situation get here? And so that's just a really great journaling question to kind of start that conversation. And then thinking about it in terms of social. So social is that family, friendship, relationship, like what's on the screen. The other exercise, which Crystal, I think you'll have a copy of this, is the circle of love. The circle of love, basically all it is, because I don't think you've probably ever heard me talk about this, Wendy. The circle of love is really what it is. It's these little circles. So it starts with a center circle and then goes out bigger like this. And what you do is you look at who is in each circle. And you look at it in terms of access to you, frequency you want to hang out, maybe the trust or the level. I love it when he's like, I thought the Lion King, but that's the circle of life. It's so good. Yeah. So the circle of love is really like, okay, who are these relationships that are closest to me, and do I want them there? And sometimes we have to move people out a ring on our circle and say, okay, they have been here, but you know what? They've been crossing a lot of boundaries. They have not been building my trust. They aren't trying to initiate and like build this friendship. So I don't know if it's worth my effort to keep pursuing that if it's not reciprocated. So then you might shift someone out a circle, or like out a layer, I guess, because there's like a bunch of circles. But then other people, you might be like, you know what? We've had some really great conversations recently. Like I just went and visited a friend on the weekend and I had this realization and I was like, you know what? The things we talk about, the lack of judgment, the lack of arguing, the lack of anything, I'm like, wow, she needs to be in a closer circle. Like that was a realization I had. I was like, oh my goodness, like I am not doing enough. Like I want to pull her in. And so we're going to find relationships where we want to pull people in. And then there's relationships where like, you know what? We need to take not a break, not stop talking to them, not cut them out of our life, just shift how we see it and say, you know what? Instead of trying to connect with that person and have coffee every month, let's just go for once a quarter. Because that's an energy draining relationship, but I really want to keep it because we have longevity or whatever it might be. So that's a circle of love. That's one of my boundary exercises that I recommend. Okay, let's look at availability. So this is another big piece of boundaries, and I have some notes down here that I want to make sure I touch on. But availability is like our response time to emails. It's like, is our ringer turned on? Are we getting like beeping notifications on our phone? Do we have social media on all of our devices? Like it's that, how available are we? Because our availability boundaries can make a huge difference. And like that hurts no one because it's with our technology most of the time. And then there's frequency and expectations. And so that's just like, okay, how frequently am I going to check my email? You know what? I don't check my email after 5 p.m., even if I am working. Like maybe I've decided, okay, even if I work late, I don't answer email after 5 p.m. because I don't want the people I'm emailing to see that I'm emailing after 5 p.m. Like I don't want them to get the idea that like this is normal. Or maybe I schedule them to go out in the morning or something. But finding a way to determine how frequently am I going to do this and what are the expectations that I have even for myself. So for social media, like I enjoy Instagram, but I have to set a timer every time I open the app because otherwise I can just scroll and then that's not healthy. Like that's not helping anyone. So availability when it comes to boundaries is really important. The other thing I want to touch on here is schedule. So schedule boundaries. This is figuring out how many activities and commitments we can actually put in our calendar, how often we're going to get together with family and do social stuff, and what that actually looks like. Like for me as an introvert, and I have a few notes here so that I want to just touch on. For me as an introvert, one of the biggest things was figuring out how many nights a week I could be out of my house. That was like a huge thing for me to be like, you know what? Twice a week, Monday to Thursday is like my max. Like being out 2 nights between Monday to Thursday, that's all I can do. And you know what? I really only want to be out 1 time on the weekend. So 3 nights leaving my house in a 7-day period, that's my max. So I would literally decline events. I would say, hey, I would love to go to that party. Unfortunately, my week is already booked because I already had my 3 nights. We were maybe going over to another couple's for a date night, and then I had like a rehearsal, and then I was going to a networking event. So I was invited to a social activity, but I was like, you know what? Thanks for inviting me. My week is already packed, and unfortunately, I'm not gonna be able to make it. I had no issue saying no because I had acknowledged that in my schedule, I do best with not leaving my house more than 3 nights a week. Other people, extroverts, social butterflies, they're like, get me out of the house every night. I don't want to be at home. I'm not like that. I can't imagine what that would feel like. But there's people like that out there. Social unicorns. So maybe it's, though, scheduling your important tasks first. Another personal example, you guys, Joseph and I always do a really great job of, before a quarter begins, like when I do my quarterly planning, looking at, and we look at our evening themes, which we decide, okay, what night of the week is going to be date night? What night of the week are we going to do our volunteer stuff? What night of the week are we, and we like create our evening themes, and then I put them in the calendar for 3 months. So what that means is that we're very aware when something else wants to come into our calendar, that we're like, oh, it's replacing this. Like this is already in here. So what should we do? So, but this fall, because of being home in the summer and some business stuff, and then the quarter was like in September, like for October, but September was absolutely nutty with me trying to get back into work and like do all these things. And then we didn't plan our quarter for October to December. We didn't put our evening themes in. And then we're like, oh my gosh, we haven't had a date night at home, let alone out, in like weeks and weeks. We're like, this is not good. We've both been working way more at night than we anticipated. But why? Because we let our boundary drop and we let other things into our schedule, and we didn't schedule our priorities. So now we're like, we've been dealing with the repercussions of that, right? For the last little bit. And so I told him, I said, in November, we're taking back our time, right? And this is just another example. Like I am a light year. I can't even tell you how far I have come in terms of understanding boundaries, realizing how important they are, and implementing them. But like, it still happens. I still forget. I still am like, oh, this didn't happen. Okay. But I'm very quick to notice it and re-implement it and re-communicate it with people, which I think is one of the best things that we can do. Work boundaries. It's really important to figure out the hours you work, overtime, how much overtime you'll work, how frequently you'll work overtime, how frequently you'll work weekends, how frequently you'll do evenings, what your max hours will be if you're salary, and like what you'll go up to. And then what it's like, okay, this is my max. I'm getting paid for this. I'll work 5 extra hours a week, but I will not do that more than 3 weeks in a row. Or, you know what I mean? Like just figuring out like, what can you handle? What can you do? And it's good to have some flexibility. Sometimes it needs to be more than that. Like it might be a crazy event or something's going on, and it's like, okay, I understand that. But for me, I spent a long time in a nonprofit space where I frequently worked 10 to 15 hours over what my salary was, but I would do it for like a year straight. That's not healthy. Okay. Like that's not healthy. And I'm sure many of us have done that before. Because it's like, well, this is what I need to do to get it done. And so my whole thing now is it's like, well, if that's what we have to do to get it done, then our job description and our compensation should actually match what we have to do in order to get it done, especially if we're high performing people that are very competent. But anyway, that's a conversation for another day. So my recommendation with work stuff or with business, like this happens for people running their own businesses too. They're like, even Joseph and I, like we just had this conversation. We're like, okay, this is our goal. Like this is what we want to work. And it's like, why are we saying this for like in a couple years? Why don't we just start doing it now and shrinking our work time and saying, okay, when M is full-time in school, we both want to only be able to work during her school hours. So either one of us could pick up and we could all do like making dinner and eating together. Like that's one of our goals with our business. That's one of the reasons why we're both running businesses, is because we want to be able to pick our kids up from school together sometimes and all make dinner as a family. It's a little thing, but like it's really important to us. And so he's like, well, why aren't we starting this now? I'm like, good point. Like, why are we waiting until we get to a certain point? Let's teach ourselves and let's learn how to run our businesses in this time frame now, rather than waiting until someday when, because that someday when is not going to come unless we start carving out that time now. So whether you have a job or you run your own business, getting clear on when you'll reply to emails, how much time you'll work on the weekends, evenings, the hours that you want to work, the season that you're in. Obviously there are seasons when it's like, okay, this big event is coming up or we're having a launch and we need to put more time in. Totally get that. But is there any compensation? Like, you know, Wendy, you were saying, yeah, if I work a weekend, then I just take a day off during the week. Awesome. Right. But what's the compensation, or what is the trade-off if for like a whole month you're working 10, 15 hours overtime to get this big project done, and then the project's over? What happens? If you're expected to keep that same pace up, that's not healthy, right? So having those conversations, and they're hard, guys. They are hard. I've had some tough conversations with supervisors, but I was like, you know what? I get that like I'm supposed to be doing all of this, but I have 7 departments. And the fact that I'm like running myself into the ground and having all these health issues because I'm trying to do this means I obviously have too much on my plate. And if I have to work this much overtime every single week just to get my job done, like something's not right here. So I've had those tough conversations and they're not fun. The business stuff, I just have like a bunch of notes down here, but business with non-clients, like figuring out how much time you want to invest in people that want to pick your brain. When you're not getting paid for it, boundaries with clients, when you answer questions, your time commitments, your availability, like no other group will I reply to basically any time of day. Only this mastermind, because I've chosen this is the only group I'll do that. And it's not any time of day. Like it's not the first thing I look at when I wake up in the morning. But like the other day I was like, okay, finally done work. All my listings are done. And then I was like, you know what? I want to check in on the mastermind and send some messages because I actually like had space and time. But I don't do that with other clients or with like people in a course. Like I'll only do that during business hours. So that's a boundary that I've said for me. You know what? With this group of women, I'm okay to like check at night or in the morning or be more flexible with like my response time. So anyway, those are a bunch of work things. Those are some of my thoughts with boundaries. I feel like we could talk about boundaries for a really long time. The only other boundary exercise that I have that I think is a really great one, and let me just find it because here it is the boundaries brainstorm. And so the boundaries brainstorm, all that it is spending some time. It's the questions that I already asked, where you feel overstretched, wasting time, feel taken advantage of. Why do you feel like this? How did it get that way? But then figuring out what you think the current situation or boundary is that's being crossed. So taking those journal things to the next level and going, okay, what do I think is the actual boundary? Is it that I've said, hey, I can only attend this event or I can only hang out with you once a month, and they just are always pestering you to like hang out and do social stuff, but you've communicated, hey, like this is what it is. It's personal, it's social, whatever it is. Or maybe it's on your end, right? So trying to figure out like what the situation and the boundary is and figuring out what area of life it is, because some of you might have amazing boundaries when it comes to work. And you're like, yep, I'm good. I'm solid with my business clients. It's like this with my work, with my employees. But you might notice a theme as you start writing down these places where you feel being taken advantage of, that maybe it's all social. Maybe it's with friends. And like as you start doing this, you realize, oh my gosh, like friends is the area. Like I've not communicated. I'm not figuring this out. Or maybe you'll be like, actually, it's with my schedule. I'm not able to say no. I'm putting too many things into my calendar. I'm saying yes to all these things. And so just trying to figure out, like, how does this make me feel? How did this situation get here? What was my role in it? And then figuring out from there, okay, what is my next step? What is the boundary I need to create? Who do I need to communicate this to? Sometimes you don't. Sometimes it's just something you need to know. But sometimes we do need to actually communicate it to those people and be like, hey, I've realized, like, in this season I'm in, that I am pretty limited with social time. And what that means for me is that as much as I would love to hang out one-on-one with you, I think for the next, like, maybe 6 months, I need to commit to doing group things with friends. That way I can hang out with more of my friends at a time, and I'm able to kind of keep up multiple relationships. And then you go to your friends and you talk to them and you're like, hey, this is what I'm thinking. And then you follow up that boundary by saying, okay, next girls' night is here. And you invite those 5 or 6 friends that you really want to hang out with, that you can't do coffee with every month with all 5 or 6 of them, but you could do a night and you can connect and have those moments. And maybe you do something where you're like out and you're going for a walk, which means people can change who they walk beside and catch up with different people. And it's not just like feeling like everyone has to be together. So then there's the actual execution of it, which we could talk about for a long time, but those are the main like exercises and next steps that I recommend with boundaries. And yeah, let's open up the floor to some conversation. And I do want to be aware of time, so we'll just go for a couple more minutes, but then I want to be able to wrap up and let you guys go. Thoughts, questions, examples?
Not examples so much as just, you're right. There's certain areas that for sure I'm like, yeah, I got the boundaries on that one. But yeah, it's I feel like they're taking more than I'm willing to give. And that's not necessarily on them, right? Like, people will always take. Take.
People will take as much as we can give them.
Exactly. So yeah, preserving the relationship means preserving me, which means preserving my boundaries.
Yeah. And I think we struggle in different areas based upon how we're wired. Like for me, I'm very task focused. So having boundaries at work with like things was okay, but I was in a nonprofit space. Whereas all the people, and I worked with family. So then my boundaries with family were not as good as with work. And so with some areas of work, I was okay. Like with my direct reports, I was fine. But like with the hours I worked or like the overtime, that was harder because it was like, right? And so there's these different elements, and it's like trying to figure out, okay, why is this harder than this? Or like, why is it harder for me to build? Like, I don't need boundaries with my friends right now. I'm like, I never hang out with my friends. I'm like, I need to increase the amount of time I am texting and hanging out with and connecting with my friends. Like, that's what I need to do right now. I don't need more boundaries. I just need to like spend more time and invest more time, right? So, but it's different for all of us. I'm an introvert with a young kid that has a hard time remembering to like text her friends, and I don't go out, and I don't like doing social things so much. So it's just figuring out how to build those relationships in a way that works, respecting my boundaries that I already have of staying home a certain amount of nights a week, right? And so it's figuring out, okay, how do I build those relationships and what I want to do, maintaining these other boundaries that I'm great with, right? Because they contradict each other. I could spend way more time with my friends if I'd go out, but I don't, and I won't. So at least not frequently anyway, but I just coming out of my mouth, I'm like, that's so funny. I could build better relationships with my friends if I leave my house. There's my answer, Catherine. There's your answer. Anyway, so good. No other thoughts or things with that? You're good. I'll just tie it together with this because burnout was something that came up in our brainstorm too. And so I called this schedules, boundaries, and burnout, and we haven't really touched on it. But here's what happens. This is why we experience burnout, because we don't have boundaries and we have not taken control of our schedule. That's why. Those are two of the big reasons. Obviously, sometimes with burnout, there can be like physical exhaustion and like actual like physical issues that we're dealing with, or there could be mental health concerns. There could be a lot of discouragement, fear. We could be dealing with anxiety, depression. Like there's a lot of other reasons why we can experience burnout, but I think two of the main things and two of the things that are the most in our control are boundaries and schedule. And that's why I paired this group together, because I was like, they all interconnect. Like having control of our schedule means we have to have stronger boundaries. You know, having stronger boundaries is going to mean we're more productive in the time that we are working, right? And so it all just comes together. So I wanted to tie it up with that. So for anyone watching the replay, please, at any time, this is now a topic that we have discussed. And so ask questions about it between our calls. If you've got something like this, would be a great hot seat or 2-minute question for somebody's speed round. Like if this is something you're like, you know what, this replay was really helpful. Could you guys tell me, like, how do you implement boundaries with, right? So feel free to use this as a bouncing off point for future mastermind calls. Yeah.
So I think it might be different when people have kids or different things like that, but I don't. And so I guess my question is with regards to boundaries, how do you stick to, like, for example, I'm like, well, sure, I have a schedule. My schedule says I'm going to work 10 to 6 today, but, you know, I'm in the middle of something. And so, okay, it's 7:30. I guess I better go now.
Right.
What tools have you found that keep it to that? Okay, actually, yeah, I'm going to be out of here by 6:15 kind of thing.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things when it comes to respecting the boundaries that we set for ourselves, and Crystal, this came up a lot in the quarterly mastermind, right? Like in the last year, is it's like, it's hard because especially if we love what we do, it's like, oh, but this is so great and we're in this cool thing and it's like, I'm on a roll. So I think sometimes it's totally okay to just blow past I had this till 6, but you know what? Going to 7:30, it's not a big deal. I think if it's a habit and if it's something that's happening like multiple times a week, or at least once a week, and it's just like something that regularly happens where you just stay late, I would really ask yourself, like, why? Why do you feel like that is more important, staying late and working on this project? Why is that more important than going home and taking care of yourself, of cooking a meal and having some time to yourself, and recharging before, like just asking yourself, like, what is there anything underlying? Because sometimes it might just be like, yeah, you know what, lost track of time, project was great. And if that's what it always is, then I think it's fine. But I do think that sometimes we will, like, oh, I'll stay late and work on this project because if I don't, this is gonna maybe how I'll feel. Or, well, Joseph's not home anyway, and so instead of going home and spending time with myself, which I need as an introvert, I would work because he wasn't home. So like sometimes there's these like little stories we tell ourselves about, and we kind of self-sabotage in a way. We say, oh, it's really important for me to, you know, have a bath every week or to read a book or to connect with this friend, but then we self-sabotage and back out of it instead of like honoring that. And I think part of it is just realizing like appointments with ourselves are just as important as appointments with other people. So yeah, sometimes it has a deeper meaning, sometimes it doesn't. It's about figuring out when it does and trying to dig into that a little bit.
It is, oh, well, I'm still working. Let me look at tomorrow's case schedule. Okay, well, that's full. When else am I going to do this? And it's almost like a workload, kind of trying to figure out how to best manage that and be like, well, I don't know if that's a 40-hour-a-week job.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think sometimes it's, for me, I worked overtime all the time, not because I was just trying to kill time at work, but because I legitimately was just trying to keep up. And that's when I had to have some conversations, be like, okay, it's great that I've taken this on. I'm happy that I'm the most skilled person you have to take on this role. Like, great, woohoo, yay me. But it comes with no pay change. My hours are the same. So basically, what I've been doing really well in this time frame, you're now expecting me to do more, but with all the same things. So sometimes that means being like, hey, showing the proof of I'm consistently working this many hours overtime just to get things done. Is there any way, even sometimes 5 more hours of admin support a week can make like all of a sudden, boom, right? And so looking at those ways where, okay, I've taken this on. However, are there any other parts of this that we can shift to someone else? This person's now been on the team for a year and a half. I think they're ready for more responsibility. Could I still manage it, but give this little piece to and trying to figure out like how to do that in a good way? Because if we do this for too long and we just work all the overtime, like then we burn out, but then that doesn't actually help the company. So if a company is smart, they'll want to keep people long term and they'll want to keep people healthy. But it's hard when it's like bottom line and hours and right, like it's a bit of a juggle. So yeah. But here's the thing, there will always be more to do. Always. For all of us, business, work, with kids, without kids, it doesn't matter. There is always something more we can do. And there are always things on our list. And so it just comes down to really us just saying, you know what? I'm done for today. It's okay. Is there a deadline I can renegotiate to give myself a bit more space this week? Can I just drop this project or move it till next week? Or, and like, because there's only so much that we can do, but there will always be something. And if we always try to get the list done, then we're like chasing our tail. And that's exhausting. I can tell you that much. Because I've been a cat chasing my tail before. Or is it a dog? Dogs chase their tail, right? I don't know. My analogy game is not on point today, guys. Anyway, so good. So good. Thank you for this conversation. I'm glad you guys could join us. And yeah, I'll get this replay up for anybody that wants to watch it in the next little bit. But feel free to ask follow-up questions, use the group chat, send voice messages, type it out, send us pictures. I don't know, whatever it is that will help share and communicate what it is that you're working on and going through and stuff. It'll be so good. So thank you so much. And I hope you have a great rest of your day and your week. Woohoo! Bye, guys.